A loud knock reverberated through the small, rugged shelter, a stark contrast to the howling winds outside. Inside, Kira's eyes snapped toward the door. No one ever ventured this far into the desolate wilderness. She moved with practiced quietness, her body on high alert as she approached the entrance. Whoever was out there was either hopelessly lost, desperate, or possibly dangerous. Kira preferred to believe it was the latter. Another knock came, weaker this time, a faint echo of a dying man. She exhaled slowly, slipping a dagger back into the sheath on her belt. With a deliberate motion, she unlocked the door. The cold air immediately rushed in, and her gaze fell on the figure standing in the doorway. A man, human by the looks of him, tall, broad-shouldered, his flight suit torn and covered in snow, his dark hair clumped together with ice, and his face pale from the bitter cold. He swayed slightly, barely able to stay upright. His eyes lifted to hers, sharp despite his exhaustion. "Help me," he rasped. Kira didn't move. A human here? It had been years since she had encountered one up close. Her people despised him. She had every reason to turn him away. Let the storm claim him. And yet, she stepped aside. "Get in," she ordered. Without hesitation, the man staggered forward, crossing the threshold before collapsing to the floor. Kira slammed the door shut behind him, sealing out the storm. She crossed her arms, watching as he shivered violently, his breath ragged. His ship had probably crashed. That explained his presence, but it didn't explain why she was letting him stay. "Take off that frozen suit before you freeze to death," she commanded. The man, his blue eyes wary, glanced at her as he began to remove his flight suit. "You always as hospitable?" he muttered between chattering teeth. Kira arched an eyebrow. "Would you rather I throw you back outside?" He let out a soft chuckle before slowly peeling off the damaged suit. Kira looked away, grabbing a thick, fur-lined blanket from the corner and tossing it to him. "Sit by the fire. You'll warm up faster." The man wrapped the blanket around himself and shuffled closer to the crackling flames. "Name's Eli," he said, his voice now steady. Kira didn't respond, her gaze hard. Eli hesitated before speaking again. "Not much of a talker, huh?" Kira didn't look up. "What's there to talk about?" Eli smiled slightly. "Fair enough. Guess I'll just sit here, then." Kira's attention drifted, though she kept a sharp eye on him. She didn't trust humans, not for a second. But it was too late now. She had already let him in. As Eli settled by the fire, Kira resumed sharpening a long, curved blade, the rhythmic scrape of steel against stone filling the space with a quiet but constant warning. She wasn't about to drop her guard, not even for a moment. Eli rolled his shoulders, attempting to loosen the tension. "So, is this the part where you interrogate me?" Kira didn't look up from her work. "If I wanted answers, I wouldn't need to ask." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Suppose to scare me?" Her lips curled into a small, amused smirk. "It should." Eli chuckled softly, stretching his stiff limbs. "Crashed here by accident. Didn't exactly plan on falling into the middle of an ice storm." Kira glanced at him. "Your ship?" "Burned up on impact. Nothing left," Eli said, a slight bitterness in his voice. Kira nodded. She'd already guessed that much. "And your people?" Eli's jaw tightened, and he glanced away. "Not coming." Kira tilted her head, studying him. "You sound sure about that." Eli shrugged, a mask of indifference. "They don't waste resources on lost causes." Kira stared at him for a moment before returning to her blade. "So, you're stranded." "Looks like it," Eli muttered. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken implications. Finally, Kira stood and walked toward a metal chest near the wall. She rummaged through it, pulling out a bundle of clothes and tossing onto the table. "Put that on. Your suit's useless, and I'm not letting you freeze under my roof." Eli eyed the clothes skeptically. "Didn't take you for the generous type." Kira shot him a sharp look. "It's not generosity. It's survival. If you die here, you become my problem." Eli raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Sounds like you're already considering me a problem." Kira exhaled sharply. "Just get dressed." Eli stood, stretching out the stiffness in his joints, before pulling on the thick, fur-lined clothes she had given him. They fit surprisingly well, though the material smelled faintly of leather and something distinctly Kira. She turned her back, giving him privacy, but her posture remained tense, prepared for anything. Once he was dressed, Eli ran a hand through his short hair and sighed. "All right, now what?" Kira turned to face him, arms crossed. "Now we set the rules." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Rules?" "This is my cabin," Kira said evenly. "I built it, I maintain it, and I protect it. That means you do what I say when I say it." Eli chuckled, a low sound. "Not much of democracy, huh?" Kira arched a brow. "Do you see a Senate here?" Eli smirked. "Fair point." She stepped closer, her presence commanding despite her small frame. "If you want to stay, you pull your weight. That means working, hunting, and keeping this place livable." Eli grinned. "You sure you want me that close to your weapons?" Kira didn't blink. "If you become a problem, I'll deal with it." Eli tilted his head. "Anything else, boss?" Kira's eyes darkened at the mocking title, but she didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she walked to the window, gazing out at the raging storm. "Temperature drops below freezing at night," she said calmly. "Even with the fire, it won't be enough." Eli leaned against the table. "What are you saying?" Kira turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "We share body heat." Eli blinked. "Come again?" Kira's stance remained unwavering. "We sleep in the same bed. The cold is lethal. I'm not letting you die under my roof." Eli rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling softly. "That's pragmatic." "It's survival," Kira replied firmly. Eli studied her carefully, searching for any hint of humor, but Kira's expression was dead serious. She wasn't joking. Not about this. Still, Eli couldn't resist a little teasing. Always as hospitable to strangers. Kira's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're the first human I haven't shot on sight." Eli chuckled. "I feel special." Ignoring him, Kira moved to the bed, pulling back the heavy furs before glancing at him. "Well," Eli shook his head, amused. "You really know how to set the mood." Kira's patience was wearing thin. "Get in, or sleep on the floor and freeze. Your choice." Eli smirked, stepping forward. "When you put it like that," he slid into the bed, the mattress firm but warm from the fire's heat. Kira climbed in beside him, her movements precise and controlled, keeping a respectable distance. Eli wasn't an idiot. He could feel the tension between them. He turned his head slightly, watching her, as she stared at the ceiling, her arms crossed, as if trying not to acknowledge his presence. Eli grinned. "You look thrilled." Kira exhaled slowly, her voice cold. "Shut up and sleep, human." Eli chuckled but obeyed, sinking into the warmth of the bed. Kira's back was against his chest, and their legs tangled beneath the shared furs. She was warm, her body heat radiating into him, and her breathing even out as she fell asleep. Eli lay there, torn between the primal satisfaction of the moment and the sharp awareness that, if she woke and realized how close they were, she might bury a blade in his ribs. Carefully, he shifted an inch away, but even that small movement made her stir. Instantly, Kira was awake, twisting to reach for the blade under her pillow. Eli raised his hands in mock surrender. "Easy, boss," he said, his voice still thick with sleep. "Not try to stab you, if that's what you're wondering." Kira's sharp gaze flicked over him, taking in their proximity. Her jaw tightened, and she abruptly pushed away, sitting up and swinging her legs off the bed. Eli smirked. "Not a morning cuddler?" Kira shot him a glare over her shoulder. "If you want to keep your limbs, you'll drop the subject." Eli chuckled, stretching out on the bed as she stood and crossed the room. She moved like someone trained for combat, every step precise and deliberate. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "So what's the plan, boss? You putting me to work today?" Kira was already at the chest, pulling out a thick fur-lined cloak. "If you're going to stay here, you contribute. No sitting around making noise." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Making noise?" Kira pulled on her boots and stood, arms crossed. "You talk too much." Eli grinned. "And yet you keep answering me. Almost like you enjoy it." Kira's eyes narrowed, clearly resisting the urge to throw something at him. She tossed him a pair of heavy gloves. "We need firewood. You chop it." Eli caught the gloves with ease, an amused smile on his face. "Manual labor? Thought you'd give me something more exciting." Kira's lips curled into a faint smirk. "You wouldn't survive anything more exciting, Eli." Eli chuckled, stepping closer, deliberately entering her space to see if she would flinch. She didn't. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly, watching him with cool amusement. "Try me," she murmured. Kira's eyes flickered for a brief moment, just a subtle shift in her expression, almost too quick to notice. Then, without another word, she turned and opened the door. "The axe is outside," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Don't lose a finger." "No promises," Eli replied, amused. The cold air slapped Eli in the face as he stepped outside, but he welcomed the burn in his muscles as he split another log. Kira had given him nothing more than a quick nod before disappearing into the trees to hunt, leaving him alone with the axe, the firewood, and the bitter wind. It was better this way. He needed to keep moving, to work, to distract himself from the fact that he was stranded on an alien world, cut off from everything he knew, at the mercy of a woman who had made it clear she didn't trust him. And yet, for some reason, he wasn't worried. Maybe it was the thrill of being on unfamiliar ground. Maybe it was the fact that Kira, despite her sharp edges and clear distrust, hadn't outright tried to kill him yet. Whatever it was, he wasn't concerned. Not yet. With a swift swing, Eli cleaved another log in two. The sound of approaching footsteps made him pause. Expecting Kira, he turned, only to find something else entirely. A figure emerged from the trees, tall, green-skinned, and dressed in dark armor reinforced with metal plating. His posture was rigid, his stance predatory, and a weapon Eli didn't recognize hung from his hip. Not a hunter, a soldier. Eli tightened his grip on the axe. "Well, you're not the welcome committee," Eli said, trying to keep his tone light. The soldier's dark green eyes locked onto him with cold calculation. "A human," the soldier said, voice laced with disdain. "Damn, you guys really don't like my kind, do you?" The soldier took a step closer, his presence intimidating. "You have no place here." Eli tilted his head, keeping his stance loose but ready. "I didn't exactly plan on this vacation, if that's what you're asking." The soldier's eyes narrowed. "Where's the woman?" Eli exhaled, forcing a lazy grin. "Not sure what you're talking about, buddy. I'm just out here enjoying the scenery." The soldier didn't look amused. Eli saw it a split second before it happened. The shift in the man's posture, the subtle twitch of his fingers toward his weapon. On pure instinct, Eli swung the axe, striking the soldier's armor with enough force to knock him back a step. Not enough to do serious damage, but enough to piss him off. The soldier recovered quickly, faster than Eli anticipated. A blade flashed out, and Eli barely twisted in time to avoid the sharp edge slicing toward his ribs. He wasn't armed. He wasn't armored. He was definitely outmatched. His only advantage was Kira. She appeared out of nowhere, moving like a shadow in the snow. Her blade was already drawn as she launched herself at the soldier from behind. The fight was over in seconds. Kira had the soldier pinned to ground before Eli could even register her presence, her knife pressed against his throat. The soldier coughed, glaring up at her. "You shouldn't have interfered," the soldier growled. Kira didn't flinch. "And you shouldn't have come here." Eli exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "So, are we going to talk about the part where he was looking for you?" Kira didn't look at him. Her focus remained entirely on the soldier beneath her. "Inside," she ordered. Eli frowned. "Kira," but one glance at her expression told him this wasn't the time for questions. He followed her back toward the cabin, leaving the unconscious soldier in the snow. The moment the door shut behind them, Kira whirled on him. "Did he say anything else?" she demanded. Eli leaned against the table, crossing his arms. "Just that I don't belong here." "Oh!" And he was real interested in you. Kira's jaw tightened. She paced toward the fireplace, gripping the back of a chair so hard her knuckles turned pale. Eli narrowed his eyes. "Something you want to tell me, boss?" Kira exhaled sharply, but didn't answer. Eli took a step closer. "Kira, She ran a hand through her dark hair, her usual sharp demeanor flickering. "I was hoping I had more time," she muttered. "That I was buried deep enough in this frozen wasteland that they wouldn't come looking." Eli's stomach tightened. "So you're running from something?" Kira met his gaze, her eyes steady. "I was a soldier," she admitted. "A high-ranking one." Eli exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "Yeah, figured as much. But what did you do to make your own people hunt you down?" Kira hesitated, her gaze flickering. "I broke orders." Eli raised an eyebrow. "That's it." Kira scoffed, her voice dropping lower, edged with bitterness. "It wasn't just any order. It was a massacre." Eli's expression darkened. "They wanted you to kill civilians?" "Women and children," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I refused, and in doing so, I turned myself into a fugitive." Eli sighed. "Well, that explains a friendly visit outside." Kira's gaze flickered. "That was just a scout." Eli frowned. "Meaning?" Before she could answer, another knock came at the door. This time it was louder. Eli tensed. Kira's hand went straight to her blade. The knock came again. This time it was even more forceful. Kira inhaled deeply. "Stay behind me." Eli didn't argue. He wasn't stupid. Kira moved toward the door, but instead of opening it, she called out, "Who's there?" A deep, rough voice answered. "An old friend." Kira stiffened. Eli saw it, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. It was enough to set him on edge. Slowly, Kira unlatched the door and pulled it open. A man stood on the other side, tall, green-skinned, and broad-shouldered with sharp features and cold, knowing eyes. He was dressed in dark clothing reinforced with leather armor, and a curved blade rested at his hip. Not a soldier, a hunter. Kira kept her expression neutral. "Ravik." The hunter smirked. "Still alive. I'm impressed." Eli shifted slightly, standing just behind Kira. Ravik's eyes flicked to him immediately, his smirk widening. "I see you picked up a pet," Ravik said, his tone laced with amusement. Eli exhaled through his nose. "You must be a hit at parties." Ravik chuckled. "Bold. I like that." His eyes turned back to Kira. "I came for you, Veeler. You know why." Kira's grip tightened on the doorframe. "I'm not going back." Ravik tilted his head, his expression calculating. "Did I say anything about going back?" "No. The price on your head is too high for that. I think I'd rather just take you straight to the buyer." Kira scoffed. "And who is it this time? The council? The warlords?" Ravik's smirk sharpened. "Someone with far deeper pockets." Kira exhaled slowly, her eyes calculating. Eli could see her weighing her options. She wasn't afraid, but she was preparing for a fight. Ravik stepped forward, his presence looming. "You know how this ends, Veeler. I'm giving you a chance to come quietly." Kira didn't move. Eli watched, tension mounting in the air. "And if I don't—" Kira's voice was steady, her resolve firm. 1 second. Ravik was casually standing in the doorway. The next, his blade was drawn, slashing toward Kira's throat. She moved fast, faster than Eli had ever seen anyone react. She ducked, spinning into Ravik's space, her own knife flashing as she struck it aside. Ravik twisted, barely dodging in time. He retaliated with a brutal kick, sending Kira sliding back across the floor. Eli moved before he even thought about it, lunging at Ravik, tackling him before the hunter could advance on Kira. They crashed into the wooden table, and Eli barely had time to register how damn strong Ravik was before the hunter drove an elbow into his ribs, knocking the wind out of him. Kira was back in an instant, slamming into Ravik from behind, her blade slicing across his arm. Ravik snarled, shoving her back before twisting toward the door. "Not bad," he admitted, panting slightly. "You've always been fast, Veeler." And then, just as quickly as he appeared, Ravik was gone, disappearing into the swirling snowstorm outside. Silence hung heavily in the cabin. Kira exhaled sharply, gripping the table for balance. "You should have stayed back," she muttered. Eli groaned. "And let you have all the fun? Not a chance." Kira shot him a glare, but didn't argue. Instead, she turned toward the door, her expression darkening. "He won't stop," she murmured. "Not until he gets what he came for." Eli raised an eyebrow. He wasn't stupid. Kira shook her head, her voice low. "Ravik isn't just a bounty hunter. He's a professional, a predator. And now we're both targets." Eli sighed, pushing himself to his feet. "So, what's the plan?" Kira glanced at him, her expression hardening. "The plan," she said, voice steady, "is to make sure he never finds us again." Eli arched a brow. "Sounds like you want to run." Kira shook her head. "No," she replied, meeting his gaze. "We hunt him first." Eli grinned. "Now that sounds like fun." Kira didn't turn around. "We don't." Eli frowned. "What?" She finally looked at him, arms crossed. "We can't outhunt him, not directly. Ravik's been doing this for years. He won't make mistakes." Eli raised an eyebrow. "So what? We wait for him to come back? Because that sounds like a pretty lousy plan." Kira exhaled, pacing away from the window. "We make him think he's already caught us." Eli blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Kira grabbed a map from the shelf and spread it out across the table. "Ravik won't stop, and he won't come alone next time. If he reports back to his buyer that he's found me, more hunters will follow." Eli's smirk faded. "And you're sure this isn't just about you?" Kira's expression hardened. "You think it wouldn't take you too? A human stranded on a hostile world, aligned with a fugitive? You're a prize, Eli. They'd sell you to the highest bidder." Eli exhaled. She wasn't wrong. "So what's the plan?" he asked, leaning forward. Kira's finger traced a map, stopping at a set of jagged peaks. Kira's eyes scanned the jagged cliffs beyond the icy forests. "There's an old bunker up ahead. Abandoned after the war," she said, meeting Eli's gaze. "We'll make it look like we ran there. Set a trap, draw Ravik in, and finish this before he can report back." Eli studied her carefully, considering her words. "You're serious?" Kira's eyes burned with determination. "I'm not running anymore." Eli chuckled under his breath. "You really are something. You know that." Kira arched an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Something?" Eli tilted his head slightly. "Most people in your situation would be terrified, but you're pissed off." Kira's lips curled slightly. "Fear is useless. Anger gets things done." Eli grinned. "You and I might actually get along after all." Kira rolled up the map with a sharp flick. "Don't get ahead of yourself, human." Eli chuckled as he stood. "So, when do we leave?" Kira turned to grab supplies, fastening weapons to her belt. "Now." The journey to the bunker was grueling. The snowstorm had settled into a slow, biting wind, but the cold still cut deep into Eli's skin. Kira moved like she was born for this. Eli, despite his military training, felt like an awkward outsider beside her. "Stay low," Kira murmured, pressing herself against the trunk of a frost-covered tree. Eli crouched beside her. "You think he's already tracking us?" Kira didn't answer, instead listening intently. Eli held his breath, letting the silence stretch. Then Kira's shoulders tensed. Before Eli could react, she grabbed his wrist and yanked him into a snow-covered ditch. Something sharp whizzed past his head. A blade. He hit the ground hard, rolling as Kira pressed close to him, her breath warm against his skin. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. They weren't alone. Eli exhaled slowly, his lips curling into a grin. "Guess we don't have to find Ravik. He found us." Kira's hand tightened around her weapon. "Good," she whispered back. "Saves us the trouble." Then all hell broke loose. Ravik was fast, but Kira was faster. She moved like a shadow, ducking low as Ravik's next strike barely missed her shoulder. The hunter snarled, lunging again, but Eli was ready. He blocked Ravik's attack with a well-placed kick to the ribs. Ravik staggered, but it wasn't enough to take him down. Eli didn't stop. He followed through, fist slamming into Ravik's gut, forcing him back into the snow. Ravik laughed, a wicked sound. Eli barely had time to react before Ravik twisted, grabbing Eli by the collar and slamming him into a tree. The impact knocked the air out of him. Before Ravik could follow through, Kira's blade flashed. Steel met steel as she drove her knife into Ravik, slicing along his shoulder, drawing deep, dark blood. Ravik grunted but didn't fall. Instead, he twisted, knocking Kira off balance and sending her crashing into the snow beside Eli. Eli groaned. I hate this guy. Kira exhaled sharply, already pushing herself back up. Then kill him. I'm working on it. Ravik lunged again, but this time Eli was ready. He dodged a blade, slipping behind Ravik's stance. Before the hunter could recover, Kira was there, her knife slamming into his thigh. Ravik roared, and Eli didn't waste the opening. He punched Ravik across the jaw with enough force to send the bounty hunter crashing into the ice. Silence. Ravik coughed, blood staining his lips. He tried to push himself up, but Kira was already on him, her boot pressing against his throat. She leaned down, her voice like steel. You're done. Ravik exhaled, chuckling despite the pain. Am I? Eli frowned. You're bleeding out, buddy. Doesn't matter, Ravik said, his grin widening. They already know. Kira tilted her head, narrowing her eyes. What do you mean? Ravik's gaze flicked to Kira. You think I came alone? That I wouldn't tell them exactly where to find you before I arrived. His grin widened. They're coming, Veeler, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Kira's fingers tightened on the hilt of her knife. Eli exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. God damn it. Kira straightened, her eyes cold. How long? Ravik chuckled. Hours. Maybe less. Kira was silent for a moment, then slowly lifted her boot from his throat. Eli raised an eyebrow. We're just letting him go. Kira didn't answer. She just stepped back, watching as Ravik struggled to his feet, clutching his bleeding side. The hunter coughed, shaking his head. You should have killed me, Ravik spat. Kira tilted her head slightly. No. Ravik narrowed his eyes. I want you to watch me escape. Kira froze. She turned to Eli. We leaving? Eli shot Ravik one last glare before following Kira into the storm. They didn't have much time. Eli wasn't sure how long they had been moving. An hour? 2? His legs felt like lead, his fingers numb inside his gloves. The cold gnawed at his bones, and his body was shutting down, exhaustion settling deep into his muscles. Kira must have sensed it because she suddenly stopped, turning to face him. There's a cave, she said, her voice firm despite the wind. 3 miles from here. Plan B. Eli's breath came in ragged gasps. And you're just now telling me this? Kira's green eyes flickered with impatience. Because I was hoping we wouldn't need it. Eli exhaled through gritted teeth. 3 miles, huh? Fine. Lead the way. Kira didn't argue. They pushed forward, the storm worsening with every step. Eli's vision blurred at the edges, his limbs losing coordination. His mind was slowing. He knew the signs, hypothermia. He wouldn't last much longer. Finally, he saw it, a dark opening in the cliffside. The cave. Kira reached it first, grabbing Eli's arm as he stumbled forward. Inside, she ordered. The moment they stepped into the shelter of the cave, the wind stopped. Eli barely made it 2 steps before his knees buckled. Kira caught him, her voice laced with frustration. Damn it! She lowered him gently to the ground and moved quickly, unrolling a thick insulated mat from her pack and spreading it out. Lie down. Eli collapsed onto the mat, his body trembling violently from the cold. Kira knelt beside him, her movements fast and precise as she pulled out a fire starter and dry kindling from her pack. Within minutes, a small but strong fire flickered to life. Eli exhaled slowly, his breath still shallow, but the warmth was starting to seep into his frozen limbs. Then he felt it, a soft, warm touch against his back. Kira had lain down beside him, their bodies close. Her hand rested lightly against the skin. Eli blinked, the haze in his mind starting to clear. Her fingertips moved, tracing slow, absent-minded circles against his back. He swallowed hard, his body reacting in ways that had nothing to do with survival. Kira exhaled, her breath warm against his shoulder. You did well today, she murmured. Eli turned his head slightly, his voice hoarse. You almost sound impressed. Kira smirked faintly. I don't impress easily. Eli huffed a quiet laugh. I noticed. His gaze drifted to her lips, soft and tempting. Kira noticed. She didn't move away. Eli inhaled slowly. Kira? She tilted her head slightly, watching him with that same unreadable intensity. Then, as if making a decision, she leaned in. Eli met her halfway. Their lips brushed, soft at first, tentative. Then the hesitation vanished, and the kiss deepened, slow but intense, like a dam finally breaking. Kira exhaled against his mouth, and Eli swallowed the sound, his hand sliding to the curve of her waist. The heat between them grew, the cold of the cave forgotten. Kira pressed closer, her body fitting perfectly against his. Eli smirked against her lips. You're warm. Kira huffed a quiet laugh, nipping at his lower lip in response. And you talk too much. Eli chuckled, then kissed her harder. The fire crackled beside them, but the real heat was between them now. Undeniable, inescapable. Eli had no idea what this meant, what they were, but right now none of that mattered. Right now, he just wanted more, and Kira wasn't stopping him. The fire crackled beside them, but it wasn't the only source of heat. Eli's hands roamed, tracing the curves of Kira's body, curves he had only admired from a distance before. Kira's breath hitched as Eli pulled her closer, his lips trailing from her jaw to her collarbone. You're relentless, she murmured, her voice husky. And you love it, he said. Kira's fingers tangled in his hair, her body pressing into his. I tolerate it. Eli chuckled, nipping at the sensitive spot just below her ear. Liar. Kira's response was lost in a sharp gasp as Eli continued a slow, thorough exploration of her. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cave, there was only them. Only the sound of their mingled breaths, their whispered provocations, their bodies moving together in a way that had nothing to do with survival. Time blurred. Neither of them stopped, not until the cold of the cave was completely forgotten, until sweat slicked their skin, until exhaustion finally claimed them. Kira curled against Eli's chest, their bodies tangled in a way that neither of them questioned. For the first time since he crashed on this planet, Eli felt at home. He pressed a lazy kiss against her shoulder. You're not as cold as you pretend to be. Kira hummed, half asleep. And you talk too much. Eli chuckled, but sleep was already pulling him under. The last thing he felt was a steady rhythm of Kira's breathing against his skin. Then darkness. Eli raised an eyebrow. And how do you propose we do that? Kira gave him a sharp look. Politely asked for keys? He frowned. Not a fan of that plan. Kira folded her arms, her posture calm, but with an edge. They expect me to run. If I let them think they've cornered me, they'll strike fast and without hesitation. Eli crossed his arms, thinking, and then what? Kira reached into her pack, pulling out a small black orb. She twirled it between her fingers, holding it up. Then I throw this. Eli eyed the orb warily. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that's not a party favor. Kira rolled the orb between her fingers, her voice steady. Neural disruptor. Once it detonates, they lose all visual processing for 30 seconds. Eli whistled. Not bad. And in those 30 seconds, Kira's smirk widened, you steal their ship. Eli raised an eyebrow. You're trusting me with that? Kira tilted her head. I thought you liked a challenge. Eli chuckled. I do, but this is insane. Kira sheathed the disruptor. It's our best chance. Eli exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. And what happens after we steal their ship? Kira's expression turned unreadable. We leave. Eli studied her for a moment, trying to read her. And then Kira hesitated. Eli smirked. You don't know, do you? Kira's jaw tightened. One problem at a time, human. Eli chuckled, rolling his shoulders. All right, boss. Let's steal ourselves a damn ship. The icy wind howled through the barren cliffs as Eli crouched behind a jagged outcrop, his pulse steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Across the frozen ridge, Kira stood alone, her dark cloak billowing in the cold air. Her stance was casual, almost relaxed, but Eli knew better. Every fiber of her being was coiled, ready to strike. This was a plan. Kira would make herself an open target. The bounty hunters would move in fast, thinking they had her cornered. Then, she'd detonate the neural disruptor, leaving them blind just long enough for Eli to slip past their defenses, hijack their ship, and get them the hell off this planet. It was simple. It was clean, and it was about to go terribly wrong. Eli adjusted his grip on the stolen pulse rifle, watching as the bounty hunters emerged from the snow-covered ridge. 3 of them, moving in a tight formation, weapons drawn. Kira slowly lifted her hands, playing the part of a fugitive with nowhere to run. One of the hunters, a tall figure in reinforced armor, smirked. "Surrender, Veeler." Kira smirked back. "Come take me." The hunters moved in. Kira moved faster. With a flick of her wrist, she activated the neural disruptor. The small black orb hit the ground and detonated with a sharp pulse. An invisible shockwave spread through the air, freezing the bounty hunters in place. Eli sprinted toward the ship, keeping low as he darted between the scattered supplies near the landing zone. The disruptor had done its job. Their enemies were blinded, disoriented, their senses scrambled for the next 30 seconds. Kira took advantage of the chaos, weaving between the bounty hunters like a shadow, landing precise strikes that sent them sprawling. Eli reached the ship. The hatch was open. The pilot seat was empty. They were actually going to pull this off. Then, a sharp electric snap. Pain exploded through Eli's body. He barely had time to react before his muscles locked up, his vision blurring as his knees buckled. The pulse rifle fell from his grip as he hit the ground, his body convulsing from the shock of an electro blade pressed against his spine. A low chuckle echoed from behind him. Too easy. Eli tried to turn his head, but the paralysis was setting in too fast. The last thing he saw before his vision dimmed was the gleaming grin of the ship's pilot standing over him. Then darkness. Kira ran the second she saw Eli go down. She knew something was wrong. The bounty hunters were still reeling from the disruptor, but the pilot, a green-skinned man with a cruel smirk and far too much confidence, had anticipated them. Now Eli was down. Kira wouldn't let that stand. She pushed forward, throwing a blade with deadly precision. The pilot dodged just barely, but it was enough to distract him. Kira lunged, her fist slamming into his ribs, her knee connecting with his jaw. He stumbled back, snarling, his grip on his electro blade slipping. Kira didn't hesitate. She grabbed Eli's motionless form, dragging him toward the ship's open hatch. They still had a chance if she could get him inside. Then, a sharp crack hit the back of her skull. Her vision exploded in white-hot pain. Then darkness. Eli woke to the sound of laughter, a slow, smug, victorious laugh. He groaned, his head pounding as he forced his eyes open. The pilot stood near the entrance of the ship, leaning against the control panel, arms crossed over his chest. Behind him, the other bounty hunters were recovering, their vision no longer scrambled. And Kira was unconscious beside him, her hands bound, a bruise forming along her temple. Eli clenched his jaw, rage simmering beneath his skin. The pilot turned to his crew, smirking. "I told you they weren't a threat." Eli exhaled slowly, his mind working fast. The pilot thought he had won. That was his mistake. Eli let his body relax, pretending to be weaker than he was. The pilot turned his back to him. Eli moved with a sharp, precise kick, slamming his foot into the pilot's spine. The man's eyes widened in shock as he stumbled forward and fell straight out of the ship's open hatch. Eli didn't wait. He lunged to the control panel, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar interface. The engines roared to life, the ship trembling beneath them. Eli grinned. "Guess I'm the pilot now." The other bounty hunters barely had time to react before Eli hit the thrusters. The ship lurched upward, breaking free from the icy ground. The storm outside swallowed them whole. They were escaping. The hum of the engine vibrated beneath his fingertips as he entered the coordinates. Earth. It was the only choice that made sense. He couldn't stay in this sector, not with a bounty on his head, not with hunters already tracking them. Earth was the one place where they could disappear, where he could disappear. The ship rumbled as it adjusted course, breaking free from a frozen planet's orbit. The icy wasteland shrank below them, swallowed by the vast emptiness of space. Eli closed his eyes for a moment, exhaustion creeping in. Then, behind him, a sharp inhale. His eyes snapped open. Kira was awake. She stirred in the co-pilot seat, her movements sluggish but growing sharper with every passing second. Her hand instinctively reached for the weapon at her hip before she even registered where they were. Then her green eyes locked onto Eli, narrowing. Eli tensed. Morning. Kira didn't respond. She pushed herself upright, scanning the controls, the trajectory, the navigation data flashing on the screen. Her jaw clenched. Kira! Eli recognized that tone. Low. Dangerous. Kira turned to him fully, her hands bracing against the armrests. Where are we going? Eli shifted in his seat. Kira exhaled sharply, her fingers curling into fists. You set a course for Earth. Eli nodded slowly. Yep. Kira's expression darkened. Without asking me? Eli sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I didn't think. That much is clear, Kira interrupted, her voice tight and controlled. But beneath the frustration, there was something else, something deeper. You just decided for both of us, she demanded. Eli turned toward her, resting his arms on his knees. We can't stay here, Kira. Not after what happened. Every hunter in the sector will be looking for us. He exhaled. Earth is the best shot we have. Kira's glare didn't soften. And you thought it was your decision to make? Eli met her gaze, steady. I made a call. I'd do it again. Silence. The tension between them was thick, electric. Kira's green eyes burned into his, sharp as a blade. Eli held his ground, waiting for the explosion. Then, finally, Kira exhaled. She shook her head, pinching the bridge of her nose. You are the most infuriating human I've ever met. Eli smirked. Only human you've ever met. Kira shot him a glare, but didn't argue. The tension shifted. Eli could feel it, the sharp edge of frustration melting into something else, something warmer. Kira leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders relaxed. Eli tilted his head. You all right? Kira let out a short, amused breath. You're lucky I like you. Eli chuckled. Like me? That almost sounds like a compliment. Kira arched an eyebrow. Don't get used to it. Eli smirked. Then after a long pause, Kira studied him carefully. Are you cold? Eli blinked. What? Kira tilted her head slightly. Are you cold? Eli exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, I'm pretty cold. Kira hummed, standing slowly. She moved toward him with deliberate steps, the flickering lights of the ship casting shadows across her smooth green skin. Eli swallowed. Kira stopped in front of him, resting her hands on the chair's armrests, leaning in just enough to make his pulse jump. Then she murmured, her voice low, Let me warm you up. Eli barely had time to react before she closed the space between them, her lips meeting his in a slow, claiming kiss. Eli groaned against her mouth, his hand sliding to her waist, pulling her down onto his lap. Kira smirked against his lips. You recover fast. Eli exhaled sharply. You're distracting. Kira leaned in, her breath hot against his ear, then stopped talking. Eli chuckled but obeyed, capturing her mouth again. The tension between them ignited, sharp edges and heat. Kira pressed closer, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body molding perfectly against his. The slow burn of their chemistry had finally reached its breaking point. Neither of them had any intention of stopping now. Eli exhaled, pressing his forehead against hers. You're really not as cold as you pretend to be. Kira smirked. And you still talk too much. Eli grinned. You love it. Kira rolled her eyes but didn't argue. Instead, she kissed him again, slow, deep, leaving no room for doubt. Eli's grip tightened on her hips, the warmth of her body sinking into his, melting the last remnant of the cold that had followed him since he crashed on that frozen wasteland. For the first time in a long time, Eli felt free. And for the first time, He knew Kira was too,